Hello everyone, and welcome to another video from my narrowboat. If you're new here, my name is Laura and I am a kitchen witch. I bring you videos about paganism, folklore, food, and being a soft witch in modern life. If you have watched any of my recent videos, you may know that I have been deep diving on tarot. Tarot has been something that I've been interested in since I was a kid. I think I got my first deck when I was maybe 11 or 12, and I just loved the cards. I loved that they came with all different illustrations. To me, it felt like the most fun way to explore fortune telling, and recently I have been working on a deck of my own that marries the meanings of the cards with the folklore and magical properties of food. So each card in the deck is being designed by myself and goes along with a recipe that explains the meaning of the card. The way that I was funding this project is with you guys. I launched a Kickstarter campaign just over a month ago and the support was absolutely overwhelming. The campaign has now finished. I'm so happy to say that it is not only fully funded, but we went over target. I think we ended up on 122% of the target. Absolutely amazing, and I'm so happy that I'm going to now be able to complete this deck. And so you haven't seen a video from me for a couple of weeks because I have just been drawing and recipe testing and researching. I've been fully immersed in the project, and with that immersion and that research, I've stumbled across a lot of misconceptions about tarot, which I already kind of knew were out there, but I wanted to make a video about tarot itself, about where it comes from, how it's used, and all of the things that people have wrong about tarot. Part of my mission as a soft witch is to show people ways to engage in magic. I say the term loosely because not everybody believes in magic as though it was fairies and wishes and spells and things just coming true. A lot of people are now coming around to the idea that paganism, witchcraft and magic is just a tool to unlock your own human psychology to get the things that you want and the desires that you have within yourself. Tarot to me is no exception to that. So I have my own specific ideas about tarot and how the tarot deck works, and I want to explain those to you today. And the point is that you do not need to believe in things like fortune telling to get something from using a tarot deck. Before I deep dive into this, I will just lastly say that if you missed the Kickstarter campaign and you're still interested in checking out my tarot deck, I've left a link below, because although the campaign is now finished, you can still pledge to get a deck yourself. Until I've actually finished all of the illustrations and the recipe testing and done the guidebook and got all of my ducks in a row, I don't need to firm up the final numbers of how many decks I'm going to get printed. So you can keep pledging for the next few weeks. I don't know how much longer. Click on the link below. If it's still open, you can still pledge, you can still get yourself a deck. So let's dive into it. What is tarot? Tarot is one of the most misunderstood practices in the world. Some believe that it's an ancient mystical system of knowledge. Others think that it's fortune telling. And some people are even fearful of tarot, believing that it's derived from evil forces. In reality, tarot is a fascinating blend of history, psychology, and most of all, storytelling. Like I said at the top of the video, you do not need to believe in fortune telling or magic or even anything spiritual to get something from what I do, and I believe that tarot is the perfect example of this. Part 1 is the origins of tarot. Tarot wasn't originally a mystical tool. The first complete illustrated tarot decks started to emerge in northern Italy in the 15th century. A couple of weeks ago, I took a trip to the Warburg Institute in central London, where they're currently holding a full exhibition all about tarot. If you're interested in tarot at all, I highly recommend going to that exhibition. It was really fascinating and it was amazing to see so many decks all together, including, and I'm going to butcher this name, but including the Visconti Sforza deck. I hope I said that right, but it was amazing to see that deck firsthand. Nobles in 15th century northern Italy were commissioning beautifully hand-painted decks like this one for entertainment. Tarot decks were a Renaissance parlor game, not a tool for divination at all. One of the myths that surround tarot is that it came from ancient Egypt. This association actually came much later in the 18th century. Occultists romanticizing tarot's connections to an ancient and esoteric knowledge. In reality, it was completely made up. There is no evidence to link the tarot deck to ancient Egypt or any kind of ancient wisdom. However, I think part of this association comes from the most famous tarot deck that most of us are probably familiar with today. This is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. It was created in 1909 and is probably the most popular deck. When people tend to think about the illustrations of a tarot deck, it is usually this deck that they're thinking of. For many years, it has been referred to simply as the Rider-Waite deck. However, this completely erases the contribution made by its illustrator, Pamela Colman Smith. She was a British artist and occultist, and if you don't know anything about her, I definitely suggest looking her up because she's a fascinating character. And despite Arthur Edward Waite taking most of the credit for this deck, it is Pamela's artistic vision and storytelling that revolutionized modern tarot. Her name deserves recognition, so I always try and make sure that I call it the Rider-Waite Smith deck. And her illustrative interpretations are a really good example of why people have this association with ancient wisdom, because of the iconography that she's used and the fact that these cards tell a story themselves. They are archetypes. They speak to ancient wisdom because the archetypes included in them are part of the human psyche. They seem familiar because they are familiar. We are all innately aware of things like the hero's journey and fear of the devil or lightning. It is no surprise then that the iconography used within tarot feels like it comes from something much, much older. Part 2. Fear and misconceptions. Tarot's link to mysticism didn't actually happen until the 18th and 19th centuries, when it started to be used as a form of fortune telling. The Catholic Church actually opposed playing cards in general. They were associated with gambling and sin. As tarot gained a reputation for divination, it was lumped in with witchcraft, paganism, and the occult. Even today, some people believe that the deck itself is something to be feared or something that comes from evil forces. People are scared to pull cards like the Tower or the Death card, interpreting it as literal death. The Death card in fact represents things like new beginnings, transformation, endings, and a period of grief, but it doesn't have to be connected to literal death. However, if you do know a little bit about tarot, you probably don't fear the Death card, but instead you fear the Tower card. But the Tower isn't just about destruction, it is also about necessary change. I'd actually argue that the card that you should fear the most is the Ten of Swords, because you're getting absolutely wrecked in that card. It is my personal belief that the tarot deck is not actually about fortune telling. I don't think that pulling a card in the tarot deck accurately predicts the future, but it can help you understand what could happen, and in turn it helps you understand yourself in the present. A tarot reading is not a cosmic telegram, it is a structured introspection. Symbols on the card act as a mirror, reflecting your subconscious thoughts. Think of it as a form of therapy, but with a bit more flair. My perfect analogy for explaining how the tarot deck works, and in fact, how all magic, I believe, works, is the story of Macbeth. I absolutely love Macbeth. I would say that it changed my brain chemistry. It's definitely one of my favourite works of Shakespeare. Partly, yes, because it is about witches, but it also completely encapsulates how fortune telling, divination, and witchcraft actually works. Tarot is often feared because people believe that it can predict a grim future, but it actually works much more like a mirror to the subconscious. And if you think about the storyline of Macbeth, this is mirrored within that. Holding up that mirror to the subconscious can actually not only show you how you feel about things, it can inform your decisions based on how you actually feel, and in turn it can embolden your actions. The witches in Macbeth don't actually cast spells or force fate. They simply predict something for Macbeth. They tell Macbeth what is going to happen, or what might happen, that he will become king. It is not through magic or fate or spells that he does become king, it is through his own actions. The idea of becoming king, this prediction, consumes him and therefore shapes his choices, his actions. He becomes king because he believes he is going to become king. He doesn't sit around and wait for it to happen, believing that there's a spell. He believes that it is his fate, and therefore that changes his choices, his actions. I am not condoning murder, but it's a really good example of how fortune telling can really change the way that we approach the decisions that we make in our lives, and how this belief in our fate, even if it's given to us in an abstract kind of way, can plant the seed and make things happen. Tarot is just another form of influence. Part 3. How tarot actually works. One of the biggest misconceptions about tarot is how it works and how to read it. A lot of people believe that you have to go to a tarot reader, a professional, to get something from tarot. Now, I'm not trying to take anything away from those readers. They are far more knowledgeable about tarot than I am, so I'm not trying to step on any toes. But I don't believe that you actually have to go to someone else for a reading. I think that you can do it yourself. Another misconception is that you need to memorize every single card in order to be able to read tarot. The structure of how a tarot deck actually works is loosely based on a normal deck of cards, but with some extras. There are 78 cards in a full tarot deck. 22 of these are the major arcana. This starts with the Fool for self-discovery, curiosity, and insight. And each card represents an aspect of your journey and consciousness. The structure of the deck itself reveals patterns, themes, and personal growth opportunities. This major arcana represents major life events and spiritual lessons. The minor arcana, which is split up into 4 different suits, wands, swords, cups, and pentacles, deals with everyday situations. They each have 4 court cards, pages, knights, kings, and queens. These represent personality traits or stages of mastery. Some people believe that when you pull a king or a queen or a page or a knight, it can represent a person in your life or you. The major arcana tells a story of personal transformation. Like I say, starting with the Fool and ending with the World. Wands represent fire. They're about passion, ambition, creativity, and action. Cups, no surprise, represent water. Emotions, relationships, intuition, and flow. Swords represent air, thoughts, intellect, communication, and challenges. Pentacles represent earth, the material world, finances, health, and stability. The corresponding numbers of the suits also explain what each card means. No surprise that the Ace is about beginnings, inspiration, potential, starting from scratch. The 2 in any suit represents balance, duality, perhaps decisions, or partnerships. The 3 is about growth, creativity, and expansion. The 4 is about stability, structure, and a foundation. 5 represents conflict, changes, and challenges. 6 is about restoration, progress, harmony. 7 is reflection, challenges, and spirituality. The 8 is about movement, discipline, and mastery. 9 is nearing completion, fulfillment, and wisdom. And finally, the 10, completion, transformation, an ending or a new cycle beginning. So although you don't actually need to memorize all 78 cards in order to be able to read the tarot, I will say that a good tarot reader is someone who can put these ideas together and create a story. Tarot reading is not fortune telling, in my opinion. It is not a gift, it is a skill. It's about intuition and pattern recognition. So whilst anyone can read tarot, and you can certainly read tarot for yourself, there's definitely a sliding scale on who's good at it and who's not. But that's got nothing to do with the cards that you pull, but it's all about how you interpret them. I've mentioned in a few of my videos now that one thing that I like to do is pull a card every day. And despite doing this, I still don't know what every single card means. You may want to actually memorize the major arcana, but hopefully the deck that you're using will have illustrations that already kind of tell the story for you. It's much easier for us to remember what those major arcana cards mean because the illustration and the story behind them kind of already tell us, and those archetypes, like I say, are already in the human psyche. So it's a little bit easier to remember what those cards mean rather than, you know, the 3 of Pentacles. As for the court cards, pages are for new beginnings, learnings, and curiosity. They kind of have a similar energy to the Fool. Knights are about action, pursuit, and drive, moving things forward. Queens are about intuition, mastery, intellectual understanding. And kings are for leadership, mastery, and external control. So for example, the 3 of Wands, number 3 is about growth and expansion, and wands are for creativity, fire, and ambition. Therefore, this card suggests growth and ambition in creative endeavors, looking ahead, making long-term plans, perhaps moving a business or a project forward, having potential and planning, but not necessarily being at the stage of action just yet. But with any card that has any kind of negative interpretation, there is always an opportunity to shift towards the positive Endings can mean new beginnings. Disappointments can lead to new perspectives. It helps to be an optimist if you're going to read tarot. So although tarot was not invented by secret societies or mystical sages, and was in fact more of a gambling tool, I actually think the origin story of tarot is much more fascinating. I love how it's evolved over the years, and not only that, I love that it's stuck around. I can understand why it has been interpreted as something that is negative, because there is no such thing as good and bad, and the same thing exists within the tarot deck. Yes, there are cards that can be interpreted as negative, because not everything that happens to us in life, not every thought that we have is all sweetness and light, but that is okay. The point of the tarot deck is to understand yourself and understand how you feel about things. That is how we find growth. That is how we move forward. From a psychological standpoint, the effectiveness of tarot readings can be attributed to a phenomena such as the Barnum effect, where individuals find personal meaning in vague or general statements. Think of things like astrology. But to me, that doesn't diminish the importance or the value of astrology or tarot. Instead, it highlights how tarot can facilitate introspection by promoting individuals to project their thoughts and feelings onto the cards. If we are able to gain insight into our subconscious mind and therefore influence our decisions and our actions accurately, surely that's a good thing. And I think this is what it comes down to. The fear of tarot is the fear of the power of suggestion. Yes, pulling the Death card or the Tower card may have you walking around for the next week watching your step, but that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's good to be extra cautious, and sometimes it's good to practice caution. The trick is to not be too gullible and to interpret the teachings of the card, not just the iconography, not just the standout message, but the growth and formative action that you can take from the teaching of the card. Which is why my deck includes recipes. Recipes that either help you embody the positive traits of a card or protect you against the negative traits of a card. Regularly drawing a card and reflecting on its imagery and meaning can provide insights into current challenges or even decisions. Over time, this practice can enhance self-awareness and personal growth. It is a tool for mindful living, like much of the things that I talk about on this channel. And after all, that is why it's called a practice. Tarot cards offer a rich history of symbolism and offer more than just a glimpse into the mystical. They serve as a bridge between the conscious and subconscious mind, facilitating introspection and personal development. By understanding their true origins and misconceptions, we can appreciate the versatile tool that they are. When used thoughtfully, tarot cards can really enrich our journey to self-discovery. Lastly, my tips for actually reading the deck and having a go yourself is number one, to try not to ask a question that is too vague. A lot of the time when I do readings for people, they won't have a question. They'll just say what's going to happen. You're not even thinking about relationships or careers or any kind of subject matter. If you leave it too open-ended, it's not going to make any sense. You have to interpret them. If you don't have any kind of guidelines or basis for interpretation, it is just going to come out like gobbledygook. The reading that I often do is simply a 3-card draw for past, present, future. And again, you can't interpret any kind of timeline on that. The past card may be signifying something from years ago, it may be something that happened last week, but it's all down to your interpretation. And a good tarot reader should be able to interpret the cards as a form of storytelling that makes sense to your situation. There are a lot of snake oil salesmen out there, there are a lot of scammers. There are so many scam artists taking advantage of vulnerable people, particularly on the internet. I have hundreds of people imitating me on things like TikTok, sending messages out to my followers saying, can I give you a reading, and trying to extract money from people. I actually don't even know what the scam is, because a lot of them, they're offering free readings. So I don't know what the scam is. I've never ever replied to those kind of people. I always block them, and I always try and get the word out there that you should just block them. Like, a good tarot reader or anyone who creates content in the sort of magical space will never message you out of the blue and ask you if they can do a reading or do your chart or anything like that. Please, if you ever get a message like that, just ignore them and block them, because they're not real. They're just scammers and bots. And I don't even know what the scam is, but I don't want to find out. And on top of that, there are people in the esoteric space, the fortune telling space or the mediumship space, who are very, very dodgy. Not all of them, of course. There are people out there who offer a wonderful service to people, but I would say the vast majority of those kind of people are grifters and scammers. And so I think it really helps to learn a bit about tarot yourself, do your own readings. You can get a lot of benefit from it. It doesn't cost you anything. But that's not to say that we should discredit or discount all people who read tarot, because a lot of them are really talented. Like I say, it's a skill, not a gift, but you don't need someone else to read for you. You can do it yourself. Lastly, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has backed my deck. I am spending about 12 hours a day at the moment just kind of researching, drawing, so much drawing. I don't think I've ever done this much drawing, but I'm really getting through it. Some days I'm doing 2 or 3 cards in a day, so I'm really happy about the progress that I've made with the illustrations, and also the recipe testing. Everything's going really well so far. And if you would like to check out my deck, although the Kickstarter campaign has ended, you can still pledge to get a deck yourself, so I'm going to leave the link below. Obviously there's a lot less urgency now because the deck is funded, like it is going to happen, it is going to be printed and made. But for some people, that's the reassurance that you needed. You didn't necessarily want to gamble on a deck that might not happen, but now it is going to happen. When they're made, I am going to get some extras made, so they will be available when they actually come out if you don't want to wait for them, because it is going to take me months to complete this project. I don't think I'm going to be sending out decks until August, possibly even September. But thank you so much for watching one of my videos. If you're new here, please subscribe. I would love to have more faces on the channel. If you appreciate my work and what I do, then I appreciate you being here or sharing the video, commenting. Anything that helps me is just wonderful. So thank you again for being here. I have a few really fun videos coming up, so please subscribe and I will see you next week.